Hello, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Hidden Truths channel, and welcome to the biggest, littlest channel on YouTube. That's what I'm going to start calling this channel, the biggest, littlest channel on YouTube, because with my analytics, something's not jiving. Let's just say that. But anyway, tonight we're going to talk about a constitutional republic in a democracy, and talk about what this country is. Because there's a lot of confusion in today's world, what form of government we have, especially by the people that are running the government. They don't even know what kind of form of government we have. So that's what we're going to discuss this evening. So anyway, last night was pretty good. I tell you what, I got a little excited sometimes, which I can do, you know. Wow, I'm growing into a grumpy old man. Imagine that. But, last night was pretty exciting. Hopefully tonight I'll keep it down a little bit, not go Alex Jones and stuff, because tonight I want to have a serious discussion. This is a serious discussion we need to have about this subject. People need to understand what form of government we have. Okay? Anyway, if you want to fast forward, if you're watching the replay, if you want to fast forward to about 3 minutes, I'll start there. Wait for some people to show up. Right now, I'm going to talk about the biggest, littlest channel on YouTube. If you look at my analytics, it's crazy. Okay? I mean, I have 170 some subscribers now, right? And this is the thing about YouTube. The subscriber count, even my view count, is going down, even with all the stuff they're trying to do to silence my channel and stuff, I'm still getting upwards 7,000 plus views a day, which I get credit for, which I'm actually getting about 10,000 views a day. So I don't know what happens to that 20 to 40% of my views. I guess people decided they didn't like watching it, and I don't know. But, the algorithm's messed up. But I tell you what, this is the biggest little channel out there. The numbers I'm getting, I mean, the numbers that this channel is getting right now, except for subscribers, is what channels that have 100,000 subscribers get. I mean, I almost had 4,000 views on my live stream last night. That's crazy. The Reno of YouTube. Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that. Reno, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. But yeah, it's just like when you're getting the views I get, and like I say, I used to get 25 to 40 people to watch my live stream. Last night it was almost 4,000. It's been in the thousands and stuff. But anyway, whatever. I don't really trust the analytics, because you get a lot of stuff from YouTube where you get messages saying that the analytics data isn't correct at the time because they're having problems. But anyway, let's get into the subject. Constitutional republic and a democracy. Okay? What's the difference and which ones do we have? Okay? People will say, even politicians, I even heard Trump call us a democracy. Okay? We're not a democracy. Remember, in a democracy, all you need is 50% majority and it passes. The government makes the rules then. Okay? The Constitution, a constitutional republic, is a unique situation. Okay? You'll have democratic republics like what East Germany was when Germany was split up into two countries, and like North Korea is, those democratic republics where the government makes the rules and stuff, gives out privileges and rights and stuff like that. But we live in a constitutional republic. Okay? We have this piece of paper called the Constitution. Things were written down on, which maximizes the protection of the American citizen. And it minimizes the protection of the federal government. It handcuffs the federal government. It restricts the federal government. Now, I realize that people are probably not quite understanding that. But even Barack Obama was talking about that one time, how he didn't like the Constitution because of the way it restricts the government from being able to do stuff. Okay? I mean, all these minority groups, like the LGBTQ and stuff, all right? You're 0.5% of the country's population, and you want a democracy? Where the hell is your voice going to be in that democracy? Because no matter if there's a Republican or the Republicans get their democracy they want, or the Democrats get their democracy they want, they're not going to allow these groups to keep going. Anyway, but yeah, we got a constitution. You know, that piece of paper that everybody wants to outdate it and stuff. It's not outdated. It's written in pretty simple English. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand it. You need to be a lawyer to sit there and be able to twist it around and manipulate it to mean a different thing than it's actually meaning, okay? The Constitution isn't hard to read. The Bill of Rights isn't hard to read. The Declaration of Independence isn't hard to read. The writings of our founding fathers aren't hard to read, okay? And the one thing about a democracy, too, they always say it's two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, right? Well, okay, one period of time before, 2 or 4 year period, you may be the wolf. And then we get a new president, and then you're the sheep. A democracy gives the government the power. It just gives the power to the government, takes it away from the people. It's just like they don't teach this anymore. And every single time I got to hear politicians get up there and say, I'm sorry, I'm not watching the chat. It's because this stuff works me up. I'm telling you, I'm so sick and tired of hearing politicians say we're a democracy. We got democratic principles in our constitutional republic. But the Constitution, back in the day when presidents and people were running for office, they were asked, how do you interpret the Constitution? Politicians never get asked that. I think Trump got asked that in the 2016 election and came up with some stupid answer. A democratic republic. Yeah, like East Germany and North Korea, right? No, we're not a democratic republic. We're a constitutional republic, okay? Our government has rules it has to follow, not rules it's got to make up that we have to follow. I like the Constitution. It protects me. It tells the government what it's supposed to do, but we've gone way, way past that. Thomas Jefferson said that the Constitution can only stand by a moral people. We're no longer a moral people. We don't have a moral culture. That's why the Constitution doesn't stand anymore. And nobody seems to care. It's the only thing that protects us. And like I say, we got 2 democracies in this country, the Republican democracy and the Democrat democracy. How about we get back to the constitutional republic? And this is one reason this country is so messed up, because they're trying to change a constitutional republic into a democracy, which it isn't. We used to get an education back when I was going to school. If our American history teacher, which was a Marine, athletic director, football coach, track coach, if he would have started teaching this type of stuff in his class, that we're a democracy and not a constitutional republic, and illegal aliens have constitutional rights and all this other stuff, he'd have been fired. But nowadays, that's just what people think. Democracy. Oh. I guess democracy, if we have 50% think that we need to make white men slaves, white men, we need to be slaves and stuff, to sit there and every black family gets issued a white male for reparations for the slavery that their forefathers endured. You know, the thing is, if a slave came through a time warp right now, was able to see the black generation or the black in this country, one thing he'd be impressed by Clarence Thomas, realizing that their suffrage did have an end. And then they would go see TikTok videos and stuff and be like, what the hell's wrong with them people? What are they complaining about? You know, you got Jasmine Crockett saying, we ain't ever going to work in the cotton fields again. That's why we need illegal immigrants here. Really? Americans are too good. We're above those jobs now, huh? I'm glad I'm not. Because, you know, I got this fencing gig that I'm doing out in these pastures out west. Nobody wants to do it. I got plenty of job security. Okay? Can't even get the illegal aliens to do what I do. Yeah, crazy. But you know what? The job still needs to be done. Anyway, you know what's not hilarious? Black people getting reparations paid to them by people who never have slaves, and the people who own the slaves were actually black as well. Well, they sold the slaves to. The thing is, back then, slaves were a commodity. They were a product that could be bought and sold, okay? Wrong or right, it doesn't matter. But you have these people, okay, they have been getting reparations since Johnson started the war on poverty. They have been getting reparations. But what about people like me? And you may ask, well, why would you be asking for reparations? Because I had family members, you know, that from years ago during the Civil War, in my lineage, that died in the Civil War fighting for the North. So my forefathers fought to free the slaves. Where's my reparations? See, it's silly. But see, I don't consider myself a victim, so I would never ask for such stuff. But when you consider yourself a victim and, you know, the whole world's against you and there's nothing you can do, and, you know, the only way to sit there and make it an even playing field is you need special rights and special privileges and more money and all this stuff. See, in a democracy, all that can happen. In a constitutional republic, it can't, because we're all equal. If you choose not to exercise your rights, that's your choice. You want to be a victim, that's your choice. If you want to get out there and pursue your happiness, like I am, in doing stuff that maybe will make other people happy, that's your choice. Thank God our founding fathers went through the bullshit they did from England. So when they won the Revolutionary War, all this was fresh in their minds and did everything they could to protect the future American citizen from the tyranny that they knew eventually was going to come even from the government they created. But I tell you what, they need to start teaching. Oh, if you're in college, right, and you're watching this, you can sit there and show your professor this, and maybe you'll get some extra credit for watching in your government or civics class. But then again, he, you know, if it's a liberal, he'd be telling me I'm full of shit. I just don't know what they're teaching anymore. I mean, I wouldn't be able to go back to college because I'd be probably no more than the professor, and I couldn't stand there and listen to lies all the time. You know, this is one thing. When you have kids and your kids are sitting there bull-flat, even if you saw them do it, they come up to them bull-faced, lie to you, try to sit there and convince you of something else. Even when we say, no, I saw it. This is what we're dealing with these people. I'm not going to be lied to no more. Okay? I'm not going to be told this is the way it is. I'm not going to be told men can have babies. I'm not going to be told this ridiculous stuff anymore. I'm not going to be told that crime's going down. I'm not going to be told that, oh, this country's going to pay off its debt And, that's one thing too. I hope everybody's prepared for suffrage, because there can be a lot of suffrage that goes on in this country when we're all going to have to pay for our government spending money ridiculously. Poor kids. Yeah, it's a crying shame that this country has degraded to, yeah. It's like, I went to school, I graduated in 86. I started school, in 74? Before the Department of Education, all the teachers I had. I just remember looking forward to growing up and having a life ahead of me and all. Everybody had dreamed what they want to be. You ask a kid now, even when they're 16, 17, and there's a few exceptions. What do you want to be when you get out of school? Well, I don't know. How do you not know? And then they want to live at home. All of us, by the time we were 16, we were ready to move out. We just had to wait to get out of school. And some of us that had good jobs didn't have to wait till they got out of school. Anyway, everything's just changed so much. It's hard to it's hard to look back and remember a world that doesn't even really exist in the history books anymore. I mean, nobody talks about it. Everybody's got their face in their phone looking at their new. I guess I'm on YouTube. Who am I to say? But I tell you what, a lot of YouTube, what I do when I'm out in the pastures and stuff, I'm not watching. I go to YouTube and I sit there and I go to old radio shows like Gunsmoke, listen to audiobooks and stuff while I'm out in the pasture. That's what I listen to. Stuff to educate myself, okay? I'm not sitting there doing screen time. For one thing, there's no radio. But it's nice to be able to have a platform. And this is one thing about these social media platforms. I should be able to go on a social media platform no matter what I want to find and go find it. I mean, you go to a store and you're going to limit your inventory because you don't like the color that toy is? What kind of business would do that to themselves? Anyway, let's see, we've been going. I'm going to cut it short tonight. One thing, I appreciate all the support I get from YouTube. If you haven't hit like, and I'd appreciate the subscribe and hit the bell notification so we can get this truth out. Get people all on the same page and realize that their neighbor's not their enemy. Get everybody realizing we're a constitutional republic. The Constitution that protects you from the government instead of a democracy that leaves you at the will of the government. They don't teach this no more. Sometimes I feel like I'm always the smartest person in the room when I know I'm not. But, I don't blame these kids. If I didn't have the teachers I had that pushed me and were concerned about me after I got out of school, because I always made the honor roll, but I could have applied myself better. And they knew that. They wanted the most out of me. And, I was in sports and stuff. I did what I had to stay in sports. Never had to take homework home. But I could have done a lot better. And my teachers knew that, and they always pushed me as hard as they could to get the most out of me. As you get older and you get into your other education, you realize that. Boy, I wish I would have tried harder when I was in high school. That stressed my teachers out so much. But we got an education. Okay? And that's one thing in a constitutional republic, they got to follow the rules. Okay, if they followed the rules, we would have the Health and Human Services Department. The government not allowed in our houses. Department of Transportation, not allowed in the semis or my vehicle. Okay? Department of Education, we definitely need to get them the hell out of the schools and put the parents that have children in schools back in charge of public schools instead of these principals and administrators you got in these schools that can't be fired by the parents, but only by higher ups that don't even live in the state. I mean, you see how school boards meeting go. Tell me the parents have any control of rights or anything. Heck, when Biden was in office, they had the FBI come in there to arrest parents going to school board meetings. I mean, parents getting in trouble for looking out for their kids' welfare. This is how crazy the world we live in. In a democracy, that can happen. And nothing in a democracy. Okay, all this Trump 2028. Okay, I guess if he pushes his democracy and they push that, we can have Trump 2028. And then Obama will be running against him. Anybody think I'm crazy about that? Because he can run for a third term too. You know, I'm so sick and tired of voting for the same people all the time. Out of parties with millions of people in them. Young, energetic. And I'm talking young. Yeah, 40 years old in your 40s is young to me, okay? Young, energetic people like J.D. Vance. I mean, Democrats got to have somebody on there. Somebody ain't totally whacked out saying totally ridiculous things that can maybe get some people to take them seriously to vote for them. But anyway, where's the young blood? You know, they need to start teaching facts and stuff in school again, like we were taught. I mean, like I say, how do you teach health class these days? We had health class in 4th grade, right? So nowadays, if you have kids in your class, like my grandson's got to deal with furries in his classroom, litter boxes in his classroom. I do believe he's 4th grade this year. That's in Minnesota, Governor Walz's state. How do you teach health class if you're not allowed to offend anybody? How do you teach human health class to a bunch of people, to a couple kids that think they're cats? I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying this. This is off the wall. Like I say, this is beyond Twilight Zone. And I thought animals weren't allowed in school. So if they think they're animals, what the hell are they doing in the school building? Yeah. I tell you what, my grandson, you know, he's level-headed. He comes home and tells about he's stressed out about it. He says these kids are acting stupid. And, you know, he has a tendency to sit there and sometimes speak his mind. And he gets in trouble. So tell him the truth now. So what's he supposed to look at these kids? Like they're okay? Well, I would say that's mentally mind-screwing my grandson. You know, I'm glad he's got tendencies, you know, where, you know, like a normal boy. This is just beyond ridiculous. But hey, with a democracy, all you need is the majority to say, yeah, that's cool. But see, the 0.5% that's like this think they're being supported by the majority. They're not. They're being used by it. Okay, and that's the thing. Once the majority gets in there and they're in there for good, all of a sudden, like in a communist country, all of a sudden that majority becomes the minority rule. They don't teach nothing these days. Okay? Communist, democratic republics build walls to keep people in. Anybody say the Berlin Wall? But see, that came down in 1989, so that was 36 years ago, so nobody remembers that no more. Nobody remembers the movies that I used to watch as a kid with people that were movies about people escaping over the Berlin Wall. I remember a few of them. watching movies about what the Soviet Union was like. Papers, please. And the thing is, we're becoming so much like that because you know why? Because they're getting their democracy. You know, I know most Americans don't think this way, but they don't have a problem making everybody think that we do. I know the rest of the world just got to be, you know, people around the world, right? And I deal with foreigners sometimes, and they come here thinking this country's so great, that we have no problems, that everybody loves each other. Okay? There are no cats in America, and the streets are filled with cheese. That's what they think. Okay? Well, what did Feifel find out when he got to New York City in the family? It's not true. And that's what they find out when they get here. It's not true. Especially nowadays. Did you use ale in the Soviet Union? No, never went there. I wasn't like Bernie Sanders and decided, hey, I'm going to take my honeymoon to the Soviet Union. And I wasn't like Lee Harvey Oswald, you know, a Marine who decided to defect to Russia, you know, go to Russia for 2 years, marry some KGB officer's daughter, come back to the United States, and then somehow get involved in the JFK assassination. Don't see nothing there. You know, I can't imagine what it's like to be that stupid, where somebody can sit there and tell you the truth and how things are, and you're not even smart enough to grasp it because it's easier to grasp an explanation that's a complete lie. Now, I made a video once about the human beings are turning into two species. You know, liberalism and stuff has turned, I mean, flat out they're taking shots to change their DNA. And they're turning into two species. Because you got, human beings are normally what we have been throughout the years. Millennial, making everything better. But we destroy everything in the process. But, you know, become more advanced, become smarter, better yourself. You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden, that over the last 30 years has changed. It's reversed itself. And now you have those kids having kids now. In the school, the teachers, I watch videos on how teachers are quitting because the alpha generation, what they call them, the young kids, are totally disrespectful, have no attention span, just can't be taught. Anybody remember the time machine? I mean, are we creating our own zombie situation here with these kids? But see, all this can be, that's a subject for another day. Anyway, but yeah, the constitutional republic protects us, handcuffs the government, tells them what they're supposed to do, and definitely tells them they need to stay out of our lives. But that's all changed. That's why I think the war that's going to be coming up will be more of a constitutional reinstatement war. You know, I don't want to create a new constitution. That's why I don't think, you know, a convention of states is a good idea, because that would just be hijacked by a bunch of, like the Tea Party was. And then they would sit there in convention of states and get us even more restricted. And they say, yep, well, you wanted this. Okay? But I don't want a new constitution. I want the Constitution reinstated the way it was written. Okay? And I want the enemies of our Constitution, the domestic ones, brought to justice. And this all needs to be brought up like the Nuremberg trials, so people can see how the government has manipulated their lives and stuff. You know, that's the thing in a constitutional republic too. Nobody's above the law. We're a land of laws, not a land of men. Meaning everybody is subject to the law equally, no matter what your position, power, or how much money you have. Boy, that's changed too now, hasn't it? I mean, if you got position and power, they really can't even arrest you anymore. Haven't seen nobody on Epstein list arrested yet, have you? No victims, I guess, huh? Anyway, but I know I'm not giving up my constitutional republic. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America. Okay? Not to this so-called democracy they want to create. I won't belong to such a union like that. Okay, I'm not going to have the government decide one day, hey, we got 51% to vote for this. Guess what? We got a new decree for the American public. Okay? Because, like I said, eventually in a democracy, everybody becomes a minority. Eventually becomes a minority. And the only majority is the government. Okay? Where they're allowed to grant rights to you. The government gives you rights and can take it away and grants you privileges to special groups. Okay? But what do? The American people aren't ready to stand up and protect the Constitution. Question, what's your opinion on this month being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month? Suicide prevention is highest in June. It needs to be something besides it was. I made it short about heterosexual month, okay? Where's that month? What about Veterans Month? Anything besides this ridiculous show. I mean, the parades they have are against the law, indecent exposure, you name it. But I guess they're allowed to present themselves in that way. But, you know, whatever. I guess to the Democrats, that's an important subject that supersedes all other stuff, okay? Like the fentanyl overdosing, the veterans being homeless, okay? Mental illness, suicide, that type of stuff. Making sure that the LGBTQA have their month. That's the important thing, okay? Just like, you know, we're not going to go visit the January 6th protesters in prison in D.C., but we're going to run down to El Salvador and make sure we see this gang member piece of shit from Venezuela. Right, Democrats? We're not going to stand up for nobody at Trump's speech because we hate Trump, and that's just our excuse. But don't worry. They're the ones that are tolerant. Okay, they're the ones that want their democracy. And this is the thing. When Biden was in office, that's all they talked about. Their democracy. This country's great. Democracy, democracy. And then the Trump's trying to ruin our democracy. You know who ruined your democracy, Democrats? Not Trump. The voters did. You know, the people that went out and voted Trump into office, those are the ones that ruined your democratic democracy. Yep. I guess you didn't have enough people show up like you did in 2020, huh? Do you like Pokemon? No, I don't play video games. I find that rather irritating. So, but anyway, we need our constitutional republic back. People need to demand it back. People need to demand that the government follow the Constitution and get rid of all this excess baggage. The thing is, with a constitutional republic, we wouldn't be $37, $38 trillion in debt right now as a country. Okay, because they would have to balance the budget. You know, if anybody should have to balance their budget, it should be the government, okay? Because they don't make a dime. I didn't want to get into some of the people that were in, Biden's cabinet. But see, this is something that's been allowed to happen. Look at who was Obama's what the hell was his name? We'll kick you down and stop, the guy with the Fast and Furious. I can't remember his name. What a piece of shit. See, these people have been allowed to get away with it for so long, and Republicans. How come George Bush was never held responsible for no weapons of mass destruction? How come? How many Americans died in that war? How come? That was a propagandist excuse to start a war. I mean, we're not going to hold none of these politicians accountable for what they do throughout the years. And then they just learn to be bad people. Like on social media, these billionaires are in charge of it. They'll never be held to the carpet for violating people's constitutional rights on these platforms. They'll never be called onto the carpet. None of these people will. Unless you're just real low-hanging fruit that ain't gonna squeal. Or you just don't know nothing to sit there and say we got somebody. Anyway, but you better wear your seatbelt. In a constitutional republic, that would be allowed because politicians would be held accountable for their actions. Remember, was it back in the 90s in that some savings bank they have in Congress or congressmen belong to, and they overdrew it by a lot of money? Nobody got in trouble. That was back in the day. If you overdrew your account by $5 with the check, the average person could go to jail. These guys were writing checks for thousands of dollars. Okay? I want our constitutional republic back. I want our government to have to follow rules too, just like we do. Okay? Laws and rules, just like we do. And I want them all to be subject to it. And like I say, they should have a tougher sentence if they get found guilty of this stuff. Because they're supposed to be better, right? And then we get lobbyists out. I mean, when I hear that, every congressman and senator and Supreme Court justice, what still I don't understand the Supreme Court justice, but they all have a few lobbyists, some more than others. Really? That's how much money big business has to sit there. I mean, you're talking 500 and some congressmen, 100 senators. Okay, so you're talking 600 and some. Let's say they each have 3. Well, that's almost 2,000, or that's 2,000 lobbyists. And then you got the Supreme Court justice. Explain to me why a Supreme Court justice needs a lobbyist. Okay, he needs to look at that Constitution, read that son of a bitch every day, and understand that. And if somebody comes in trying to convince him differently, he can say, no, that's not what it says. But whatever. See, in a constitutional republic, that won't happen. See, this democracy takeover has been happening for a very long time, well over 100 years. And that's why Americans are falling for it, because we've just been lulled to sleep. And every generation gets a little bit more restrictive and less free. Now, I thought our generation was great and we were free, but our grandfathers and our parents told us, you don't have any idea what freedom is. The same thing I tell my kids and my grandkids now. You don't have any idea what freedom is. So it's just progressively been happening. And then when you get to my age and you think back, you can see how much it's changed. So anyway, but whatever. Hopefully we all wake up one day and put the government on notice and stuff, okay, and stop this silly stuff. But we got so many problems in this country because of the democracy they've been trying to create. All about, and based on emotion too. Based on emotion. That was one thing we were taught as kids. We don't care how you feel. Get the shit done. Okay, it was based on reality. You're allowed to feel how you want. Get it done. People ain't taught that anymore. Identity politics, yeah, you know, let's divide us as much as possible, especially down to the root common denominator, what color you are. I just don't understand the hatred somebody would have towards somebody just because of what color they are. Who can honestly say, because we all met people of different races, who can honestly say one race is different from the other race? Some of the cultures might be different, but you got good people and bad people. You got assholes in every race. You got racists in every race. I mean, you just got moronic human beings in every race. And you got good people in every race. No matter, just because your color doesn't mean, oh, I'm a good person because I'm this color or I'm this nationality. That's beyond stupid. Okay? And then I got to hear other people of other races talk about whites being subhuman. Really? You're going to talk to me like Hitler talked about the Jews? We're animals? I just got one question for all you non-whites in other nations, in other nationalities, okay, that hate your countries, so you're moving to the West that are white-dominated populations that you think suck to live a better life. That's a head scratcher. That's a head scratcher. But see, they don't have to think past that. They just got to think, oh, white people are bad, and we're here to sit there and take what they got. I mean, it's insanity. Anyway, it's a crazy world, people. It's a crazy world. It's just getting worse. Every day, the Twilight Zone, the new episode we live in, just keeps getting a little weirder, okay? You know, look how much everything's changed just since 2020 and that old fiasco. And how everybody's become more submissive and stuff. What do you think it's going to be like in 10 years? I wonder what it's going to take for the average person who thinks that, you know, this country and this whole world just going in the right direction. I wonder what situation is going to have to happen for them to be like, whoa, and they open their eyes and see it for what it really is. Okay? The thing is, the rest of the world used to be like this for many years before it came to the United States. And I got to see it overseas. But now I see it here. And it's like it's being invited in. Because, you know, in a constitutional republic, the government would have to follow immigration laws. You know, like they used to have, you know, Ellis Island, you know, should read up on that. It's interesting how even the stairs that people would have to walk up. And the doctors would observe people as they're walking upstairs just to make sure they're healthy. If you weren't a fit human being and your story didn't match up and they thought you were questionable or you had a disease, they paid your way, but you got sent back to your country of origin. You weren't allowed in onto the continent. Was that racist back then? Boy, those type of policies let the right people in, and we created a pretty damn good country because of it. Brought in a lot of intelligent, ambitious people that were poor, but they wanted to live in freedom. And we're going to take advantage of every right they had. and they became successful. Okay? They weren't going to be a victim no more of a government, which they had come from. So anyway, our constitutional republic has done many great things for this world. It's created a country that was more successful and mightier than the founding fathers could ever dreamed of. But that's all been hijacked. Because the thing is, there was a little bit too much money that was being made by the average person, and the powers that be decided they want more of the piece of the action. Okay? And they restricted us. And that's what we've been dealing with through all these years, well over 100 years. That's why every parent and grandparent says to their children, you have no idea what freedom is. Okay? James Dean was a rebel without cause. I mean, you watch those. I just remember growing up as a kid, okay? Friday and Saturday nights, small town, cruising, small town. Yeah, maybe I did grow up and leave it to Beaverville. Maybe I did a little bit too much, but it was nice living up in a town like that. Friday nights, summer night, people all on the street downtown sitting on the benches. I guess when we were cruising, we were being watched, weren't we? But it was just everybody got along. And now you couldn't even do that because you'd have one side of the street yelling at the other side of the street. Anyway, if they persist on this democracy they want, it's just going to get a lot worse. So, anyway, crazy world we live in. But anyway, everybody have a great night. That's all I got for tonight. And remember, cherish that Constitution. Because without it, we wouldn't have our guns, we wouldn't have our freedom. And a lot of us, we definitely wouldn't be living the life we are now. So, it sucks, but that's the way it is. But we're going to fight to get it back. Didn't want to spend my retirement years this way, but what other choice do I have? I have kids and grandkids. It's not just me anymore. And they need to have a future too. And if grandpa ain't ready to help them have a future, then what kind of damn grandpa am I? Especially if I still have the ability to do it. Okay? And until I lose that ability, then I'll have to support it in some other way. But right now, yeah, I can still do foxhole. Anyway, everybody have a great night. And, let's pray for our Constitution. Because I took an oath to support and defend it. I don't have a choice. A man stays true to his oath. And there's a lot of other vets out there that think the same way. We don't want to go experience in this country what we've experienced overseas. But we'll be a lot more motivated here. Okay, it'll be a lot more personal for us. Anyway, so got to do what you got to do. But, I won't be a slave. I won't give up my freedom and my dignity at all. Okay? There's no way I'll sit there, I'll die on my feet before I'll spend 40 years on my knees. So, but everybody have a great night. This is Tom. I am out.